I was at a friend's place last weekend, doing what every socially active college student does on a Friday night. You know what I'm talking about. Watching Star Trek. And I know what you're thinking. Wow, Star Trek. That's pretty hip. You must be pretty popular with the fellas. Yeah, pretty much. But something that a lot of people don't know about Star Trek is that it's not just green women and technobabble. As the leading expert in Star Trekology, it is my intention to help you move beyond the stereotypes of Star Trek to see the significance it has in our culture today, and perhaps even convince you to give an episode a shot. First, we will trek through our technology today to see where Star Trek has had an influence. Next, we will see how Star Trek has explored strange new worlds in its social progressiveness. And finally, we will see how watching Star Trek will help us to live long and prosper. Now, I know what you're thinking. Kari, what is a smart, confident, devilishly attractive woman like you doing watching a silly, unrealistic series like Star Trek? Well, I'm glad you asked. Flattering voice in my head. But what you might be surprised to find is that Star Trek is actually closer to reality than you would imagine. There are several pieces of technology in our culture today that have their roots in Star Trek. For example, do you recognize this device? You should, because it is widely regarded as the inspiration for the cellular phone. And perhaps you recognize this. It's called a pad and has been used in Star Trek since the 80s. I'm given to understand there is a similar device out now. I'm sure with a completely different name. According to an interview with Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak by The Telegraph, Wozniak said that he would often go home in the afternoons to watch episodes of Star Trek, then return to his office in the evening to work throughout the night. Clearly, we can see where Apple got their influence. However, technology inspired by Star Trek is not confined to nifty gadgets that help us to procrastinate in writing our speeches. Not that I would know anything about that. But first, ask yourself, what's the best part about going to the doctor? Being stabbed with needles, right? Well, on the offhand chance that you don't enjoy impalement, a Star Trek-inspired piece of medical technology could make your visits a bit more pleasant. Strikingly similar to the hypospray in Star Trek, a 2004 Popular Science article named Sonoprep the best of what's new. It uses ultrasound technology to open microscopic pores in the skin surface through which medicine can flow directly into the bloodstream. Okay, so it sounds worse than the needle, but it is completely painless and much more efficient. According to an ecotherapeutics representative in a 2012 conference, there has been further research done on this product so that it can now be used as a needle-free blood sugar monitor and a needle-free method of giving inoculations. This means it will benefit millions of diabetics, children, and 20-year-old college students who get the heebie-jeebies at the sight of a needle. Not that I would know anything about that. The atmosphere of imaginative thinking in Star Trek gives engineers innovative ideas in how to make science fiction a reality. Like the new ideas in technology that Star Trek has inspired, Star Trek has set a socially progressive standard since the 1960s. Lieutenant Uhura, played by Nichelle Nichols, is widely known as the first African-American woman on television who did not play a maid. In a PBS interview in 2011, Nichelle Nichols said that she was originally planning on leaving Star Trek after about a year, but was persuaded by someone to stay. You may have heard of this person before. His name is Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. That's right. MLK was a self-professed Trekkie, which means if you have something wrong with Star Trek, you have something wrong with Dr. King. You racist. This precedence that resulted in an increase in diversity in crews throughout the year, reaching a peak in Star Trek Voyager. Out of a main crew of 10 characters, one of whom is not featured here, There are 6 non-humans, 3 characters of ethnic minority, and 4 females, one of whom is the chief engineer, and another who is the captain of the entire ship. This means there is only one white male human in the entire leading cast. The cohesiveness and camaraderie of this diverse crew sends a clear message regarding a celebration of differences. The characters seem to say, seriously? You're having problems getting along because of skin color? We're different species. Think you guys can handle it. A quotation I live by comes from Tuvok of Star Trek Voyager. We often fear what we do not understand. Our best defense is knowledge. In Star Trek, the only bad guys are the ones that we don't understand. Even when a bad guy race is established, there are always later episodes from the perspective of that race, so that we understand their culture and why it is that they do the things that they do. By setting a precedent for social change, the wide diversity in Star Trek encourages a pursuit of understanding and an acceptance, even celebration, of those who are different than ourselves. Now, you may be thinking, this is great and all, but what does it have to do with me? What does it have to do with watching Star Trek? Can't I just admire it from a distance? Of course not, don't be ridiculous. There are many benefits to watching Star Trek yourself, 2 of which are improving your vocabulary and expanding your critical thinking abilities. First, one of the most common compliments I receive is on my ability to articulate myself. But before Star Trek, me no speak good even little bit. It's not that Star Trek is complete gobbledygook if you don't have a huge vocabulary already. Rather, it uses articulate dialogue in a very natural way so that just by watching it, you pick it up gradually. And if you think that vocabulary is not a pressing matter, research scientist Johnson O'Connor would disagree. According to his article, Vocabulary and Success, gee, I wonder what that article is about, he found that vocabulary is a better measure of success than anything else he has been able to isolate and measure. Whether you are writing a paper, giving a job interview, or simply holding a conversation with someone that you respect, you are constantly being judged on your ability to articulate yourself. Second, Star Trek encourages an expansion of critical thinking by asking questions without definitive answers, compared to, for example, the Jersey Shore, in which the question of how to prepare for one's evening can be summarized in a mere 3 letters, GTL. The questions in Star Trek are a bit more complex and force you to think for yourself. Books like Star Trek in Philosophy, Wrath of Kant, further explore questions posed in Star Trek. For example, if you kill your clone, is it murder or suicide? Is it possible to create a self-aware machine? And if it is, does that machine deserve the same rights that you and I do? And if it doesn't, why not? How do we define humanity and sentience, and are those 2 things different? By constantly provoking us with difficult questions, and by speaking to us as gosh darn adults, Star Trek encourages an overall expansion of one's noggin. Today, we've looked at the excellent qualities of Star Trek beyond the stigma of being silly or unrealistic. We saw the technology inspired by Star Trek, the social acceptance and pursuit of understanding that it encourages, and the benefits of watching it ourselves. We learned that watching Star Trek isn't exclusive to pale nerds with glasses and no social life. I mean, just look at me. Okay, bad example. But with this knowledge, I hope that you are encouraged to look beyond the stereotypes of Star Trek and consider watching it for yourself. All episodes of Star Trek Voyager are streaming on Netflix. Take advantage of everything Star Trek has to offer, so that you may live long and prosper.